This video is brought to you by the online weaving school, where you can find classes and memberships for all different levels of weavers, plus a wonderful weaving community. So take a moment to check that out. Hi weaving friends, I've got a super quick little video for you today, just to talk about something that you may not have heard about before. Now, I'm sure that most of you weavers are very familiar with the snap test. Just in case you're not, the snap test is when you're trying to find a yarn that is suitable for your warp. One little test that you can do is to grab the yarn between your fingers, hold on and pull, and if it snaps, then you need to maybe reconsider it for warp. So this is some of my hand spun. It's a lovely, soft, fluffy yarn. I would still consider maybe using this for warp, but I'd be very careful with my tension, because it's not a hard and fast rule. If your yarn does snap, then depending on just how weak it is and what type of yarn it is, you can still use it for warp with careful tensioning and weaving. I've done it before, and I've done it with things like rayon chenille, which will fail the snap test every time. But as a newer weaver in particular, if you get a yarn that snaps that easily, you may want to reconsider and go for something stronger, like a strong cotton or a strong wool. Now, the part that you may not have heard about before is the drift test. At least that's what I call it. I don't know if there's any official name for it. And I don't actually have a yarn that is really suitable for the drift test. So what I did is I got a little bit of my hand spun, but this is just a hand spun single. So this is like the first part of the spinning, where it hasn't actually been plied with another yarn yet, so it's not very strong. It has like a moderate amount of spin or twist in it, but not a great deal. So I'm going to use this to give you an example of what the drift test looks like. So if I go to the fluffy end of this yarn, which is a lovely, beautiful, soft merino wool, you can see that at the end the twist has come out. It's very, very wispy, and it doesn't take very much for me to just pull that apart. So if you had a yarn that was like that, that is an absolute nightmare yarn for warping with, and I just wouldn't touch it for warp. For weft, yep, sure, absolutely. You can use wool roving unspun or with a light twist. You can use singles in your weft, but for your warp, it's a different story. So if I go a little further up the yarn where there is a little bit more twist, I'm going to do the drift test again. So rather than the snap test, which requires your strength, like you're pulling it tight between to see how it's going to go under tension on the loom, this is more of a gentle pull rather than a snap. So you're allowing your hands to come apart, and if the yarn drifts apart like this one does, then it's really not going to be any good for warp, because what's going to happen is you might be able to warp up a full warp without having any breakages initially with a yarn like this, though I doubt it. But if you do, you would find that over time, because the warp yarn undergoes friction and tension and advancing the warp and going through the heddles and all of that kind of stressful stuff that potentially stresses a yarn, this yarn rubbed over and over is just not going to survive if it's a drifty sort of a yarn. It's going to wear really thin, it's going to lose bits of fluff off it, just like this. I can just pull them off, and it's just going to, and then that's going to cause breakages for you. So yes to this as a weft yarn, but no to this as a warp yarn. So that's all I have for you today, friends. If you have ever warped up with a drifty yarn like this, leave your experience in the comments, because it's always useful for other people to know which yarns to avoid. You can talk about brand names if you want to, that's fine. And sometimes it's just nice to share your not so positive weaving experiences with others. I hope to be seeing you all very soon, so until next time, happy weaving.